He found an abandoned Doberman puppy on the road. What happened next will break you. That afternoon, the sun scorched the Bitterroot Valley as if the earth itself had been set on fire. The temperature climbed past 90 degrees, and the light bounced off the asphalt in a blinding shimmer. I was driving home from the lumber mill along that same narrow road that hugged the rusted wire fence on the edge of town. Trucks and locals rolled by as they always did, tires throwing up plumes of dust, each person lost in their own world, too busy to notice anything else. If it hadn't been for the faint glint at the base of that fence, I probably would have driven straight past. Something dark was moving in the sun-burnt grass. I squinted, thinking it was a piece of trash fluttering in the wind. But then it shifted again, barely, like a fragile breath trying to stay alive. My heart lurched. I slowed down, pulled over to the shoulder, hazard lights blinking in the blazing noon. Cars kept passing, faces turned, then turned away. No one stopped. I stepped out. Heat rose from the road in waves, bending the air like glass. When I got closer, the trash bag let out a sound. A whimper so faint it almost vanished beneath the roar of engines on the highway. I knelt, and what I saw made my chest lock tight. A Doberman puppy, 2, maybe 3 months old, was trapped under the lowest bar of the barbed wire fence. His hind legs were twisted around the rusted strands, blood dried around his ankles. His black and tan coat, once smooth, was matted with dust and oil. The ground beneath him was cracked from heat, but that small body still trembled, still tried to move as if refusing to surrender. I could hear his breathing, rapid, hoarse, uneven. Each inhale came with a shudder so weak it looked like his ribs might break. His eyes were half closed, pupils pinched to slits in the harsh sun. I looked around. The road was empty of pedestrians, full of traffic. Someone had to have seen. Someone must have. But nobody stopped. A few drivers slowed, then pressed the gas, leaving only the stench of exhaust behind. I dropped to my knees. The heat seared through my jeans. My hand touched the wire, sharp and burning like the cruelty of the people who'd passed by. I spoke softly, afraid to startle him. "Hey, easy now, kid. I'm not going to hurt you." His eyes cracked open, glinting with something that pierced right through me. Not anger, not fear, just exhaustion. The look of someone who had been waiting far too long just to be seen, just for someone to stop. I took off my jacket and draped it gently over his body, shielding him from the sun. His skin was cold, unnaturally cold for a day like that. I slid my hands beneath the wire and tried to lift. Nothing. I clenched my jaw, pulled harder, metal screeching, the pup crying out in pain. Fresh blood welled, but the wire loosened. I pulled again, every muscle straining until the bar gave way, a strand snapped, and his small body slid free, limp onto the dirt. He didn't move. Not a twitch. For a second, I thought I was too late. I leaned down, pressing my ear near his muzzle. A breath, weak but there. I exhaled, shaking as if it were my own life that had just been spared. "It's okay, kid. I've got you now." I lifted him. He weighed almost nothing, all bone and skin, his head falling against my chest, breathing rough and shallow. I wrapped the jacket tighter, shielding him from the glare, and walked back to the truck. A semi thundered past. The driver glanced, then looked away. I heard laughter trail behind, not sure if they were laughing at me, the fool cradling a filthy dog in the blazing heat. I opened the passenger door and laid him down on the seat. His eyes fluttered, lips trembling, and a faint whine escaped not from pain but from something that sounded like a plea. I stroked his head. "You're all right now, little one. I'm taking you home." He didn't answer, just exhaled light as wind, but real. I turned the key, the engine rumbled to life, and the truck rolled forward, away from the rusted fence and all those who'd looked and driven on. Under that blinding midday light, in a world too bright with indifference, I held that fragile life against me, and for the first time in years, I felt my heart beat for something other than emptiness. On the drive back, I caught my own reflection in the side mirror. Sunken eyes, streaks of gray in my hair, a face dusted with dirt and sweat. Beside me, the puppy lay still beneath my jacket, his chest rising every so often in shallow rhythm. That faint sound of breathing cut through the blinding daylight like the lone pulse of a heart still trying to be heard in a world that had forgotten how to listen. I drove through downtown Hamilton. People walked, laughed, and carried their coffee cups as if nothing in the world had changed. At a red light, I looked out the window. Children pedaled their bikes, bells chiming. A young woman passed with her golden retriever smiling. No one looked inside the old pickup where a small life was fighting to stay alive. No one asked, no one knew. And I felt anger, then shame not for them, but because I had once been just like them. 4 years ago, when Mary died, I stopped feeling altogether. The small house on the mountain slope became a shelter for silence. Breakfast meant cold coffee and the wind pushing through the window frame. I stopped playing music, stopped tending to the flower bed she used to love. Her chair at the table stayed untouched, empty, a quiet reminder that I no longer needed to speak to anyone. Each night I'd sit by the window staring at the mountains fading into dusk, my chest hollow and weightless. They say time heals, but I've only ever felt it bury what once lived inside me. Each passing day turned me into a shadow, working, driving, eating, sleeping. No feeling, no memory, no laughter, just existing. And then, today, in the merciless heat of noon, a single fragile breath had pulled me out of that numbness. The breath of a nameless creature, unwanted and left behind in a world full of people. When I lifted him from the ground, his warmth cut through my frozen skin, and something inside me cracked, not much, not loud, but enough to hurt. I took him to Dr. Collins's clinic, an old friend from town. The small building sat at the end of the road, its glass door dusty, the open sign still glowing. When I carried the pup in, she looked up startled. "Good Lord, Earl, where did you find him?" "Caught in the fence. All day." She looked from him to me, then nodded softly. "You did right. He's still got a chance." They laid him on the steel table, shaved away the grime, and washed the blood from his legs. I stood nearby, still clutching the edge of my jacket. Each time the needle pierced skin. His body trembled, but he didn't bark, didn't fight. Only exhaled as if surrendering. Once or twice I caught his eyes turning toward me, dim but steady. I didn't know why, but that look made me glance away. After a while, Dr. Collins said quietly, "If he makes it through tonight, he'll live." I nodded, but my heart wouldn't slow. I leaned close, whispering in his ear, "Hang in there, kid. Don't end up like me, okay?" When I stepped back outside, the sunlight was still blinding, glinting off rows of windshields. People kept moving, laughing, living. The world didn't pause for a dying pup. But inside me something had shifted, a small crack, but real. Driving home, the wind rushed through the window carrying pine and sawdust. I remembered the last morning with Mary, her hand in mine, her voice a whisper. "Don't close your heart, Earl. There's still so much out there that needs saving." I had nodded then, but I'd forgotten that promise long ago. Until today. By dusk, the light softened, spilling across the steering wheel like molten gold. I pulled over to the roadside, silent. Inside me wasn't just the image of a broken puppy anymore, but the memory of breath of life, of something fragile, yet worth holding on to. And I understood. Maybe Mary was right. Maybe I wasn't the one saving that little dog. Maybe he was the one pulling me back into the world I'd let slip away. I don't remember how long I sat on that bench outside the clinic. Maybe a few hours. Maybe the whole afternoon. Time stopped existing there, only the ticking of a clock and the sterile scent of antiseptic mixing with the faint smell of rain still clinging to my jacket. Inside, Dr. Collins and her nurse were fighting to stabilize the puppy IV fluids, warming pads, stitches around his torn legs. And me, I just sat still staring at the closed door like it was the edge between two worlds. Each time the light flickered behind the frosted window, my chest tightened. I didn't pray I'd long stopped believing in anything. But inside my head one thought repeated over and over. Please, don't let him die. Outside, the late sunlight slanted across the parked cars, glowing amber. Now and then, people came by with their pets glancing at me, an old man sitting motionless, mud still on his clothes, and shook their heads as they walked past. Some smiled politely. Some pretended not to see me at all. I didn't care. My whole body felt frozen in that single moment, caught between the life and death of a creature I'd known for only a few hours. I tried to remember the last time I'd felt this way. So worried I couldn't swallow, couldn't move, couldn't think of anything but waiting. I lowered my head, fingers interlaced. The image from noon kept looping in my mind like a broken reel, the dog lying limp under the fence, the sun burning down the cars rushing past. No one stopped. No one. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became, so angry my lips trembled. Angry at the ones who passed without looking. Angry at myself because if it had been years ago, I might have been one of them too. I had been that kind of person, walking past someone's pain and seeing nothing. I drew a deep breath and looked toward the road beyond the clinic. Highway 93 stretched ahead, cars weaving through the golden dust. A small piece of the world full of people in a hurry, each believing that stopping wasn't their job. I remembered the dog's eyes when I lifted him, clouded, tired, but still focused on me. That look didn't blame. It just asked why. Why was the world so cold that a tiny life had to wither beneath a fence in broad daylight? Why did dozens of people drive by and none of them stopped? And why was it me, a man who'd forgotten how to care, who ended up being the one to kneel? I had no answer. Only a tide of fury rising in my chest. My fists clenched until the knuckles went white. Bastards, I muttered. All of them. Me included. A gust of wind rattled the sign outside, its metal clinking softly. The sound snapped me out of it. I loosened my grip and looked up. Dr. Collins stood in the doorway, her hands wrapped in gauze, sweat shining on her forehead. Her eyes were gentle but tired. "Earl," she said quietly. "He's still breathing, but it's weak. We're doing everything we can. If he makes it through the night, his chances will be much better." I nodded, unable to speak. My throat burned. I managed to whisper one question, voice rough. "Is he in pain?" She shook her head. "We've given him something. Now it's just a matter of time." She turned back inside, leaving me alone. Through the narrow crack of the door, I could see his small body on the steel table. The IV is dripping slowly, the monitor beeping in steady intervals. Each sound felt like a countdown in my chest. I stayed, I don't know how long. Didn't eat, didn't drink. The sun sank, and shadows stretched across the tiled floor. I didn't want to leave, not out of fear of bad news, but because I knew that if I went home, I'd fall back into that old hollow silence as if none of this had happened. I wanted to be here, to see proof that kindness still existed, even if all I could do was sit and wait for a fading life to find its breath again. As darkness swallowed the last of the light, I remained where I was, hands gripping my knees, eyes locked on the door. In the silence, I could hear my own heartbeat syncing with the soft beeping inside. Slow, weak, but steady. And for the first time in 4 years, I realized something terrifying and beautiful. I was afraid to lose something. Because that fear meant I was alive again. That night, I stayed in the same spot. The clinic was almost silent now, lit only by a faint yellow glow and the steady hum of the air conditioner. Dr. Collins had told me to go home and rest, but I shook my head. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that little dog beneath the fence again, his trembling body, those pleading, wordless eyes. I couldn't just go home and pretend this was another bad day in a long line of bad days. Through the frosted glass, I could still see him, a tiny shape wrapped in a thin blanket, an IV line running from his front leg up to the hanging bag. The light caught the wet fur on his back, shimmering like ashes after a storm. Each time his chest rose, however slightly, I found myself breathing with him. When it stopped, so did my heart. Dr. Collins came out, pulling the door quietly behind her. She held a file in her hands, eyes red from the long night. "His heart's weak, Earl," she said softly. "We've given fluids, kept him warm, administered meds, but if he doesn't start breathing stronger on his own, soon there's nothing more we can do." I looked at her, then back through the glass. "Maybe if I stay," I said, "he'll hear my voice." She hesitated, then nodded. "Just a few minutes, all right." I stepped inside. The air was cold, thick with the sting of disinfectant. The slow beeping of the monitor filled the room like the heartbeat of the place itself. I moved closer, looking at that small face-eyes closed muzzle wrapped in white gauze fur near his mouth, stiff with dried blood. I placed my hand on his head, careful, afraid to break something fragile. "I'm here, kid," I whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." He didn't react, just a faint tremor of breath. I sat down, keeping my palm against his back. Amid the scent of antiseptic and the hiss of machines, I could hear the wind slipping through the cracks of the window, soft but cold. I pulled the blanket higher, covering his shoulder. Time thickened, losing shape. Minutes, hours, maybe both. When I finally looked up, the clock's hands pointed near midnight. The lamplight spilled through the window pane, pale and distant on the floor. Then the monitor's tone quickened. I froze, eyes locked on him. The tiny body twitched, once then again. A small convulsion, but real. I shot to my feet, heart hammering. "Collins." My voice cracked. He's moving." She rushed in with the nurse. They checked his pulse, his breathing. I stood back, feeling like my chest might burst. Then I heard her whisper, "He's breathing. Heart's stabilizing." I grabbed the edge of the table, dizzy with relief. Tears burned my eyes before I even noticed them. The puppy whimpered, a faint broken sound, his head tilting toward me, though his eyes were still shut. That sound, weak but determined, was life returning. I dropped to my knees beside the chair, everything around me blurring. Dr. Collins placed a hand on my shoulder. He made it Earl. I could only nod. My throat felt crushed. I looked at that fragile creature, white bandages wrapped around his legs, wee lines thin as threads, and wondered how something so small could fight so hard to stay. I sat beside the table again, eyes fixed on him. His breathing was slow but steady. I placed my hand gently on his back and felt the warmth spreading beneath his skin. A small warmth, but real, like the last coal glowing in a cold night. I don't know how long I stayed, but when I finally stepped out, dawn was near. Through the eastern window, the first light of morning spilled across the steel table where he lay. It filled the room, soft and golden, touching everything with quiet mercy. I stood still watching. Dr. Collins said he would need days to recover, but all I could hear was the only thing that mattered: he was alive. I walked outside, inhaling the sharp chill of early air. The sky was gray-blue, the kind of cold that stung yet cleansed. I leaned against the wall, closed my eyes. The sound of his weak breathing still echoed in my head, blending with the steady beep of the machine, two small sounds carrying more meaning than any words could. I thought of all those who drove past the fence yesterday, the ones who didn't see, didn't stop, didn't care. And I thought of myself once no different from them. And in that moment I understood, maybe what makes us human isn't what we see, but what we choose not to look away from. I opened my eyes toward the east. The sun was rising, casting its new light over my hands still stained with the dried blood of yesterday. I smiled, weary, but at peace. "Welcome back, kid," I whispered, "both of us." The next morning, the first light slipped through the white curtain and spread across the cold tile floor. I was still in the same place back against the wall holding a cup of coffee, gone cold. I couldn't remember if I had slept at all, only that every time I heard the steady, soft beep of the machine, inside something in my chest unclenched. Last night, I thought I might have to witness another death. But now, in that small room, a fragile breath was winning against it. Dr. Collins stepped out with a faint smile. "You can go see him, Earl. Just don't scare him." "Okay," I nodded, rising to my feet, knees creaking in protest. I walked into the room, and the world seemed to slow down. The puppy was still there, but everything about him was different from the night before. His breathing was steady, his chest lifting and falling with quiet rhythm. His ears twitched when the door opened. I stopped, afraid to move too quickly. Morning light slanted through the window, glinting on his now dry, black and tan fur gleaming like gold ash. He opened his eyes. The same deep brown as last night, but now there was light in them. A small spark, fragile but real. He didn't look afraid, didn't flinch. Just looked as if searching his mind for some faint memory. I knelt slowly, placing my hand flat on the floor, palm facing him. "Hey, remember me?" My voice cracked. "I'm the one who pulled you out from under that fence, kid." He didn't move, just blinked. Then, as if guided by something ancient, he tilted his head and sniffed my hand. A weak, trembling inhale, but clear. I held my breath, afraid even air might break the moment. Then it happened. His nose touched my palm. Just a light brush, soft as wind, yet it felt like my heart exploded. I could feel the warmth of his breath on my skin, the faint scent of medicine and damp fur mingling so real I had to close my eyes to hold it still. "Yeah, that's right, kid," I whispered. "I'm here." Dr. Collins stood in the doorway, smiling. "You know, he didn't let anyone near him all night. But when he heard your voice, he started moving. I think he remembers." I looked at her, then at the pup, and nodded slowly. I wasn't sure if he remembered, but I knew he felt the presence of someone who hadn't walked away. I sat beside the recovery table, watching him for a long time. The IV line still hung, the white bandages wrapped his legs, but he could lift his head now just a little. Each time he looked at me, his tail gave the faintest twitch, not a wag, just a muscle's flicker, but enough to tighten my throat. I asked quietly, "Does he have a name?" Collins smiled. "No." "You want to give him one?" I studied him for a moment. In that light, he looked like a small coal that had survived the fire, charred, glowing, but not gone. "I think I'll call him Scout," I said. She nodded. "That's a good one, a little survivor." I reached out, brushing my fingers lightly over his head, careful not to touch the wounds. He didn't pull away. Just breathed, then slowly closed his eyes. For a second, I felt him lean into my hand, not from weakness, but trust. A fragile, instinctive kind of trust that burned sharp behind my eyes. I sat still, saying nothing, just listening to his breathing blend with mine. Two souls, one old, one new. Both had once wanted to let go, now finding warmth again in the same small room. Outside, wind rustled through the pines, sunlight spilling gold across the window pane. The smell of cold coffee, antiseptic, and dog fur mingled into something familiar, the scent of life. I looked at Scout and whispered, "Let's try again." "Huh?" "A second chance. For both of us." He stirred just slightly, like a nod. I smiled. And in that smile there was something I thought I'd lost forever. Peace. When I stepped out, the sun had flooded the porch. I paused by the window watching through the glass. Scout still lay there, eyes closed, breathing steady. And I knew from that moment on, I wasn't alone anymore. 3 days later, I was finally allowed to bring Scout home. Dr. Collins gave me careful instructions. Be gentle. He's still weak. Keep him warm. If the fever comes back, call me right away. I nodded, lifting him onto the passenger seat. His body felt as light as a handful of leaves, his brown eyes drifting around, not fully awake but no longer afraid. As the truck rolled down the dirt road, sunlight filtered through the windshield and I glanced over. He'd rested his head against my arm, breathing slow and steady. I thought maybe for the first time in my life, that old house wouldn't be silent anymore. The first few days passed in strange, gentle peace. Scout ate little, slept often, but each morning he grew stronger. He learned to walk out onto the porch to lie in the sunlight beside my old set of tools. When I worked on the wood bench, he curled up by my boots, ears drooping tail, giving soft, sleepy taps like the rhythm of a safe heartbeat. And little by little, the wooden house that had once been hollow began to make noise again, the clatter of metal bowls, the sound of breath, the faint scratch of paws against the floor. But on the 6th night, the storm came. Wind screamed through the tin roof and the temperature dropped fast. I was about to turn off the lamp when I heard a whimper from the corner. Scout was curled up tight, trembling, his nose dry, breathing quick and shallow. I pressed a hand to his forehead, burning hot. Fever. It came so fast I could hear my own pulse change. I fumbled for towels, warm water, and blankets, trying to cool him down. "It's okay, kid," I kept saying over and over. "It's okay." But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Rain hammered the roof like gunfire and the light flickered. I held Scout close, sitting right there on the floor. His breathing grew heavy, his legs twitching faintly. It felt like each breath he took was being stolen away by the storm outside. I whispered, "Don't give up, you hear me? Don't you give up." I didn't know if I was talking to him or to myself. Thunder cracked, windows shuddered. I pressed my palm against his chest. His heart still beat, but faintly. I remembered that night in the clinic, the monitor's slow beep, the yellow lamp, that fragile rhythm of breath. I'd stayed by him through that fight. I'd stay through this one too. I wasn't going anywhere. In the middle of the storm, I reached for Mary's old wool sweater and wrapped it around him. It still carried a trace of soap, faint and warm. I stroked his head, whispering, this was hers. She used to say it brings luck. Scout trembled, then buried his face deeper into the fabric. His breathing began to steady, small but sure. I held him tighter, eyes open. I was afraid that if I blinked, he'd stop. By dawn, the rain softened. The wind moved off into the hills. I was still sitting there, the sweater damp with rain and tears. When the sky lightened, Scout stirred. His eyes opened a slit, his tongue brushed my fingers, weak but alive. I laughed, the sound breaking in my throat. "Good boy," I said, "stubborn little bastard just like me." I carried him onto the porch when the sun rose. The whole valley shimmered wet, the air sharp and clean, so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Scout lay in my lap, eyes closed, his damp fur glowing in the morning light. I looked around the cabin, and for the first time it didn't feel empty anymore. Maybe the house hadn't changed. Maybe I had. I thought of Mary, of all those years of silence, of the nights when my heart had almost turned to stone. And then I looked down at the small, defiant creature sleeping in my arms, a being who had fought twice to stay alive. I whispered, "We made it through the storm, didn't we?" Scout didn't answer. He just breathed, chest rising gently in the golden air. But I knew, because in every quiet breath of his I could hear Mary's voice again, "Save something, Earl, and you'll find you've saved yourself too." 2 weeks after that stormy night, Scout could walk on his own. He was still thin, but his eyes grew brighter every day. The wound on his leg had closed, leaving a thin silver scar that ran across his ankle like a thread of light. I called it the mark of the survivor. Every time I brushed my hand over it, he'd lift his head and look at me with those deep brown eyes shining as if to say, "We made it." The house was no longer quiet. Every morning, the tap of his claws on the wooden floor sounded like the drumbeat of a new day. I brewed coffee while he chased leaves across the porch, his tail whipping wildly in the sunlight. I hung Mary's photo back on the wall, right above the window. For years, I couldn't bear to look at it. But now, with Scout sleeping beneath it, the picture felt peaceful, like Mary was smiling at the two of us. Sometimes in the afternoon, I'd take Scout back to the road where I'd found him. The fence was still there, rusted bars, a few broken wires from the night I cut him free. I'd stop looking through the tall grass, feeling something strange, not pain, but gratitude. I whispered, "This is where you started over, isn't it?" Scout didn't understand, but he walked to the fence, sniffed around, then turned back to me, tail wagging softly. Then he sat down right in the same spot where I'd once knelt in the mud, his gaze steady, calm like an answer. I laughed, a rare, real laugh. "Yeah," I said, "I get it. We're both starting over from here." From that day on, Scout and I walked that road every morning. People in town got used to the sight of us, an old man and a young dog, quiet but constant. Some would stop and ask, "Where'd you rescue that pup from?" I'd smile and say I didn't rescue him. He rescued me. They'd laugh, thinking it was a joke, but it wasn't. Because when you've lost faith in kindness and a voiceless creature looks at you not with pity, not with demand, but with pure trust, you understand what it means to be saved. Every time Scout rests his head on my leg, I hear what words can never say: gratitude, love, and unshakable faith. No speech, no language, just presence. Just staying. Sometimes Dr. Collins texts me, "How's the little guy doing?" I sent her a picture, Scout, stretched out in the sun beside my old toolbox. She replies, "I think he's found his person." I look at the photo for a long time before answering, "I think so too." At night, when Scout sleeps, I sit on the porch and look up at the stars. The wind drifts down from the mountains carrying the scent of pine, and something warm, something alive. Sometimes he wakes pads over and rests his head on my knee, eyes half closed, breathing softly. In that quiet, our breaths fall into rhythm. Two lives, both broken once, now healed enough to share the same calm. I think of what Mary said before she left. "Don't close your heart, Earl. There's still so much left to save." I used to think she meant the world, but now I know she meant me. I stroke Scout's head and whisper, "You know, kid, maybe we're both just creatures given a second chance. Not because we deserve it more than anyone else, but because someone still believed we could change." He lifts his head, eyes a soft tail flicking gently as if he understands every word. I smile, tilt my head toward the sky, and whisper, "Thank you, Mary, for sending him to me." Before me, dawn breaks over the Bitterroot Range. Light spills across the dew-soaked valley, turning the old fence gold. Scout darts into the yard, looks back, and lets out a single bark, sharp, clear, and alive. I laugh, tears spilling before I can stop them. He doesn't need to speak, because sometimes just being alive and being loved is the most beautiful way to say thank you. Maybe none of us can save everyone, but every time we stop just once to see the pain of another living soul and choose not to look away, the world shifts a little. Scout is only a small, wordless dog, but somehow he's taught me what people often forget, that kindness still exists, that love needs no language, and that sometimes saving a life is how we save our own. If this story touches you, share it, because somewhere out there another creature is waiting to be seen, to be heard, to be saved. Help us spread those small miracles, because compassion doesn't need words. It only needs a heart willing to stop.